Stop thinking poor. Learn the mindset of the 1% of rich people. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to effortlessly glide through life while the rest of us are grinding away just to keep our heads above water? They're not necessarily smarter than you. They didn't inherit secret family fortunes. And they're definitely not using some mystical money manifestation technique they learned from a guru on Instagram. Yet somehow, they're building wealth while you're wondering where your paycheck disappeared to again. Here's what's really happening. The top 1% don't just have more money than everyone else. They think about money in a completely different way. While most people are stuck playing financial defense, constantly worried about bills and expenses, the wealthy are playing offense, strategically building systems that work for them even when they're sleeping. The truth is, most of us were programmed from childhood to think about money in ways that virtually guarantee we'll stay middle class forever. We were taught that working hard automatically leads to success, that saving pennies counts as investing, and that anyone who talks about getting rich must be greedy. Meanwhile, the wealthy learned entirely different rules and have been using them to build generational wealth while we argue about whether a $4 coffee is reasonable. Here's what might sting. Your current financial situation is not an accident, bad luck, or the economy. It's a direct result of how you think about money. And until you change those thought patterns, your bank account will stay exactly where it is. Comment mindset shift if you're ready to stop thinking poor. Let me show you the 11 mental shifts that separate the wealthy from everyone else. Number 1. Foundation shifts. Let me start with the first shift that changes everything about how you see money. The first major shift that separates wealthy thinking from poor thinking is understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Now, before you roll your eyes and assume this is some boring accounting lecture, stick with me, because this concept alone can transform your entire financial future. Most people think they know what an asset is. They'll point to their car, their expensive watch, maybe their college degree, and proudly declare these as assets. But here's the problem that keeps them broke. They've got the definition completely backwards. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That's it. That's the entire distinction that separates the wealthy from everyone else. That car you're so proud of, it's costing you hundreds of dollars every month in payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance. That's not an asset. That's a liability disguised as a status symbol. The wealthy understand this distinction intuitively. Before they buy anything, they ask themselves one simple question. Will this make me money or cost me money? If it makes money, they buy it. If it costs money, they either avoid it entirely or they use income from their real assets to pay for it. This is why you'll often see millionaires driving 10-year-old Hondas while people making $50,000 a year are financing brand new trucks they absolutely cannot afford. The second shift is about time horizon, and this one might be even more powerful than the first. Poor people think about money in terms of days, weeks, and months. They're focused on making it to the next paycheck, covering this month's rent, maybe saving up for a vacation next year. Their entire financial vision extends about as far as the next billing cycle. Wealthy people think in terms of decades. They make financial decisions based on where they want to be in 10, 20, or 30 years from now. This long-term thinking changes everything about how they approach money. Instead of asking whether they can afford something right now, they ask whether this purchase or investment will help them build the life they want in the future. Instead of celebrating a tax refund as free money, they see it as proof they gave the government an interest-free loan for a year and immediately adjust their withholding. But that's just the obvious part. What I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who stay stuck and people who break free. Here's where this gets really interesting. The wealthy don't just think long-term about their investments. They think long-term about their education and skill development. While most people stop learning the moment they walk out of their graduation ceremony, wealthy individuals treat education as a lifelong investment that compounds over time. They're constantly reading, taking courses, attending seminars, and surrounding themselves with people who challenge their thinking. They understand that every skill they develop and every piece of knowledge they acquire becomes an asset that can generate returns for decades. This brings us to the third major shift, and this one might be the most important. The top 1% are absolutely obsessed with understanding how money actually works. They don't just throw their savings into whatever investment their coworker recommended at the water cooler. They don't blindly trust a financial advisor who makes money whether their clients succeed or fail. They take the time to educate themselves about compound interest, tax strategies, different asset classes, and market cycles. Most people avoid learning about money because they think it's complicated or boring. The wealthy embrace this complexity because they understand that financial literacy is the foundation of financial freedom. They know that every hour they spend learning about money will pay dividends for the rest of their lives. But here's what separates the truly wealthy from people who are just financially literate. The wealthy don't just understand money, they understand psychology. They know that success with money is at least 80% behavior and only 20% knowledge. They've learned to control their emotions, delay gratification, and make rational decisions even when their feelings are screaming at them to do something different. This psychological mastery shows up everywhere. When the stock market crashes, poor people panic and sell everything at the worst possible time. Wealthy people see market crashes as opportunities to buy quality investments at discount prices. When poor people get a windfall like a bonus or tax refund, they immediately start thinking about what they can buy with it. Wealthy people immediately think about how they can invest it to create even more money in the future. There's ancient wisdom about this that goes back thousands of years. Proverbs 24:3-4 says, "By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures." The wealthy understand they're not just building bank accounts, they're building understanding that fills their lives with opportunities. Here's your actionable step for today. Run the assets test on everything you own. Make a list of what you consider assets. For each one, ask honestly, does this put money in my pocket or take money out? If it takes money out, it's a liability. Reframe how you see it. That car isn't an asset, it's a transportation tool that costs you money. Then, shift your time horizon. Before making any purchase over $500, ask yourself, where do I want to be in 10 years? Will this purchase move me closer to that vision or further away? Finally, commit to education. Read one book per month on money, investing, or business. Listen to finance podcasts during your commute. Take one online course per quarter on a skill that increases your earning potential. Let me share a story that brings this all together. I know a man who spent 5 years in his 20s buying cars, watches, and things he thought were assets. By age 35, he had nothing but payments. His friend, the same age, drove an old Toyota but had $300,000 invested. When the first man asked how, his friend said something that changed everything. "You bought things that cost you money every month. I bought things that pay me every month. Your assets were actually my liabilities. Your fancy car impressed people at red lights. My investments bought me freedom." The principle the 1% live by is this: real assets work for you, fake assets work against you. Time horizon isn't a restriction, it's vision. Education isn't a cost, it's compound interest for your brain. Stop confusing looking wealthy with being wealthy. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to stay trapped in the earn and spend cycle forever. Number 2, behavioral shifts. The fourth shift is about creating versus consuming, and this is where most people are trapped without even realizing it. Most people are primarily consumers. They work to earn money, then they spend that money on things that make other people wealthy. They buy products, they pay for services, they consume entertainment, and they repeat this cycle until they retire with barely enough money to survive. Think about your last paycheck. Where did it go? Probably to your landlord's mortgage, to corporations for products you consumed, to streaming services, to restaurants. You traded your time and energy for dollars, then immediately handed those dollars to people who've built systems to capture them. Wealthy people flip this equation entirely. They focus on creating value for other people, whether that's through a business, investments, or developing skills that command higher compensation. Instead of just being consumers, they position themselves as the people who own the businesses, create the products, and provide the services that everyone else is buying. Now, this doesn't mean you need to start a Fortune 500 company or become the next tech billionaire. It means shifting your mindset from someone who just earns and spends money to someone who creates systems and owns assets that generate money. Maybe that's starting a side business. Maybe it's investing in dividend-paying stocks, so you own pieces of the companies everyone else is buying from. Maybe it's developing expertise that allows you to command higher fees for your services. The key insight here is that wealthy people understand the difference between working for money and having money work for them. Poor people trade their time directly for dollars, which means their income is always limited by the number of hours they can work. Wealthy people create income streams that aren't dependent on their personal time and effort. This is why you'll meet people who seem to work less than everyone around them, but somehow have more money than people grinding 60-hour work weeks. It's not because they're lazy or lucky. It's because they've built systems that generate income, whether they're actively working or not. Wait. There's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to stay trapped in the time for money exchange forever. The fifth shift is about risk, and this is where most people get it completely backwards. Poor people think wealthy people take huge risks with their money, constantly gambling on risky investments or starting businesses that could fail spectacularly. But the reality is almost the opposite. The wealthy understand that the biggest risk isn't losing money on an investment. The biggest risk is not investing at all. Think about it this way. If you keep your money in a savings account earning 0.5% interest while inflation runs at 3% annually, you're guaranteed to lose purchasing power every single year. That's not safe. That's financial suicide in slow motion. Meanwhile, the stock market has averaged about 10% returns over the past century, even accounting for crashes, recessions, and world wars. The wealthy don't see investing as risky. They see not investing as the riskiest thing you can possibly do with your money. They understand that doing nothing is actually doing something, and what you're doing is choosing to get poorer every year while pretending you're being conservative. But here's where it gets really interesting. While poor people avoid financial risk, they take massive risks in other areas without even realizing it. They risk their entire financial future on a single income source by never developing additional streams of revenue. They risk decades of their life working for companies that could eliminate their position tomorrow. They risk their retirement security by assuming Social Security will somehow fund their golden years. The wealthy spread their risk across multiple income sources, multiple asset classes, and multiple strategies. If one investment performs poorly, they have others that might perform well. If one business struggles, they have other revenue streams to fall back on. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket and hoping for the best. There's ancient wisdom about this that's been around for 3,000 years. Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, "Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land." Diversification isn't a modern concept. It's timeless wisdom about not concentrating all your risk in one place. Here's your actionable step. Run a risk audit on your life right now. What percentage of your income comes from one single source? If it's 100%, you're taking a massive risk. Do you have any investments outside of a savings account? If not, you're guaranteeing purchasing power loss. How many months could you survive if your primary income disappeared tomorrow? That's your real risk tolerance. Then reframe how you see risk. Stop seeing investing as risky and start seeing not investing as a guaranteed loss. Start small if you need to. Even $50 a month into an index fund is infinitely better than zero. Build your comfort with market volatility over time. Risk is managed through time in the market, not by timing the market. Let me share a story that drives this home. I know a woman who kept $80,000 in savings for safety. She avoided the risky stock market for 10 years. After a decade, she had $85,000, tiny interest gains that barely kept up with inflation. Her friend invested $80,000 in a simple index fund. 10 years later, she had over $170,000. When they compared results, the first woman realized something devastating. I thought I was playing it safe. I was actually taking the biggest risk possible, guaranteeing I'd lose to inflation. My safety cost me $80,000 in opportunity. The principle is this: true risk isn't volatility. It's permanent loss of capital through inaction. Safety isn't keeping money still, it's keeping money growing faster than inflation destroys it. The riskiest position is often the one that feels safest. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about how the wealthy use the system itself. Number 3, strategic shifts. The 6th shift might surprise you because it's something most people actively avoid thinking about. Wealthy people are absolutely obsessed with taxes, but not in the way you might think. They're not trying to evade taxes or hide money in offshore accounts. They're laser-focused on understanding tax law and using every legal strategy available to minimize what they owe. While most people think about taxes once a year when they're frantically searching for receipts and hoping for a refund, wealthy people think about taxes with every financial decision they make. They understand that it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep after taxes. Here's the math that most people never calculate. A person earning $200,000 who pays a 40% effective tax rate is keeping $120,000. A person earning $150,000 who pays a 20% effective tax rate is also keeping $120,000. Same take-home pay, despite a $50,000 income difference. This is why wealthy people max out their retirement contributions, invest in tax-advantaged accounts, and structure their businesses to minimize their tax burden. They're not being greedy or unpatriotic, they're simply following the tax code as it was written and keeping more of their money so they can invest it and build more wealth. Here's something that will probably annoy you, but it's true. The tax code is actually designed to reward the behaviors that wealthy people engage in naturally. If you own a business, you get tax deductions. If you invest in real estate, you get depreciation benefits. If you contribute to retirement accounts, you get tax deferrals or tax-free growth. The government wants people to start businesses, invest in real estate, and save for retirement, so it incentivizes these behaviors through the tax system. Poor people inadvertently choose the most tax-inefficient strategies possible. They earn regular W-2 income, which is taxed at the highest rates. They keep their money in savings accounts that generate taxable interest. They buy things with after-tax dollars instead of structuring purchases through businesses where they might be deductible. Then they complain that the wealthy don't pay their fair share, not realizing the wealthy are simply playing by the same rules, but understanding them better. The 7th shift is about leverage, and I'm not just talking about financial leverage like loans and mortgages. I'm talking about leveraging other people's time, other people's money, other people's expertise, and other people's networks to achieve results that would be impossible on your own. Poor people try to do everything themselves. They think asking for help is a sign of weakness, or they're too proud to admit they don't know something. Wealthy people are constantly looking for ways to leverage resources they don't personally own to achieve their goals faster and more efficiently. But that's just the surface. What's behind it? is what will startle people about how leverage actually works. This shows up in countless ways. Instead of spending years learning to manage their own investments, they hire financial advisors who do this professionally. Instead of trying to understand every aspect of tax law, they work with accountants who specialize in tax strategy. Instead of attempting to build a business entirely with their own capital, they raise money from investors or take out strategic business loans. But here's the key insight. Wealthy people don't just use leverage randomly. They understand that leverage amplifies both gains and losses, so they're extremely strategic about when and how they use it. They'll use leverage to acquire assets that generate income or appreciate in value, but they avoid using leverage to buy liabilities or fund consumption. It sounds simple, but the hardest part is what's about to be told next. The eighth shift might be the most counterintuitive of all. Wealthy people are incredibly generous with their money, but they're generous in ways that also benefit them financially. While poor people think you have to choose between making money and helping others, wealthy people understand that the most successful businesses solve problems for other people. They don't see money as something to hoard or guard jealously. They see money as a tool for creating value, solving problems, and building relationships. When they invest in a company, they're providing capital that helps that business grow and create jobs. When they donate to charity, they're often getting tax deductions while supporting causes they care about. When they pay for quality products and services, they're supporting other businesses and entrepreneurs. This abundance mindset changes everything about how they approach opportunities. Instead of asking, "What can I get out of this situation?" they ask, "What value can I provide?" Instead of trying to win at other people's expense, they look for situations where everyone benefits. This naturally leads to better relationships, more opportunities, and ultimately more wealth. Poor people often operate from a scarcity mindset. They think there's only so much money to go around, so if someone else gets rich, that somehow means less opportunity for them. They see money as something to compete for, rather than something to create. This mindset leads to jealousy, resentment, and missed opportunities because they're so focused on what they don't have that they can't see possibilities right in front of them. There's ancient wisdom about this that's powerful. Proverbs 11 verse 25 says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." The Jewish concept of tzedakah teaches that giving creates flow, while hoarding creates stagnation. Even the tax code rewards generosity with charitable deductions. Here's your actionable step. Meet with a CPA who focuses on tax strategy, not just tax filing. Ask them, what legal strategies am I not using to minimize my taxes? Max out all available retirement contributions. If you're self-employed, learn what business expenses are legitimately deductible. For leverage, audit your time. What are you doing that someone else could do better, faster, or cheaper? Hire a virtual assistant for $15 an hour to free up your time for $100 per hour activities. Use other people's expertise. Don't try to learn everything yourself. Hire specialists. For abundance, practice giving value first this week. Help someone with no expectation of return. Notice how opportunities flow when you give first, instead of asking what's in it for you. Let me share a story that ties this together. An entrepreneur learned the tax code and restructured his business. He went from paying $60,000 in taxes to $25,000 legally. He used that $35,000 savings to invest. 5 years later, that investment was worth $80,000. He told me, "I didn't cheat the system, I learned the rules." Poor people ignore the playbook, then complain the game is rigged. I read the playbook and played accordingly. He used leverage to grow faster, gave generously to causes he cared about, and found that abundance returned to him multiplied. The principle is this. The system isn't against you. It's just written in a language most people refuse to learn. Leverage isn't cheating, it's efficiency. Generosity isn't an expense, it's an investment in relationships that pays back multiplied. Do you see anything unusual? The answer is right here. in how the wealthy turn information and money itself into constant motion. Number 4. Execution shifts. The 9th shift is about information and decision-making, and this is where wealthy people really separate themselves from everyone else. Wealthy people are voracious consumers of high-quality information, but they're extremely selective about their sources. They understand that in the information age, your success is largely determined by the quality of information you consume and how quickly you can turn that information into action. While most people get their financial advice from social media, cable news, or casual conversations with friends who are just as financially confused as they are, wealthy people seek out experts, read actual research, and base their decisions on data rather than emotions or popular opinion. But here's what's really interesting. Wealthy people don't just consume more information, they consume different types of information. Instead of focusing on day-to-day market movements or the latest financial drama in the news, they're reading about long-term economic trends, technological innovations, and demographic shifts that will create opportunities over the coming decades. They also understand that information without action is worthless. Poor people often get trapped in analysis paralysis, constantly researching and planning, but never actually doing anything. Wealthy people gather enough information to make an informed decision, then they act. They know that taking imperfect action is usually better than taking no action while waiting for perfect information. This willingness to act on incomplete information might seem reckless, but it's actually based on a sophisticated understanding of risk and opportunity cost. They know that waiting too long for certainty often means missing the best opportunities entirely. The 10th shift is about money velocity. And this is where the truly wealthy separate themselves from people who just have savings accounts. While most people think the goal is to accumulate money and let it sit there looking pretty in their bank account, wealthy people understand that money is meant to move. They're constantly looking for ways to put their money to work, cycle it through profitable investments, and generate returns that can be reinvested for even greater returns. Poor people treat money like a pet rock. They get excited when they finally save up $5,000, then they park it in a savings account, earning practically nothing, and pat themselves on the back for being financially responsible. Meanwhile, inflation is quietly eating away at their purchasing power, like termites in a wooden house. Wealthy people see the same $5,000 as an opportunity. Maybe it's the down payment on a rental property that generates monthly cash flow. Maybe it's seed capital for a side business. Maybe it's the start of a diversified investment portfolio. The point is, they're not content to let money sit idle when it could be working to create more money. This doesn't mean they're reckless with their capital. They understand the difference between investing and gambling. But they also understand that keeping money in low-yield savings accounts is actually a form of gambling too. You're betting that inflation won't erode your purchasing power faster than your account grows. And historically, that's been a losing bet. The 11th and final shift is about what I call strategic impatience, and this might be the most important one of all. Poor people are impatient about the wrong things and patient about the wrong things. They want immediate results from their investments, but they're perfectly content to spend decades in jobs that barely cover their expenses. They'll panic and sell their stocks after a few months of poor performance, but they'll stay in toxic work environments for years without doing anything to change their situation. Wealthy people flip this entirely. They're extremely impatient about improving their circumstances. If they're not happy with their income, they don't just complain about it for years. They immediately start looking for ways to increase it, whether that's developing new skills, starting a side business, or negotiating better compensation. But when it comes to their investments, they have the patience of a monk. They understand that building serious wealth takes time, and they're willing to wait years or even decades to see the full results of their strategy. All of the above will be meaningless if you miss the last detail. This strategic impatience shows up in their daily habits too. They're impatient about wasting time on activities that don't move them forward. But they're patient about building systems and processes that will pay off over the long term. They'll spend months perfecting a business system that saves them hours every week, while poor people waste those same hours every week because they're too impatient to invest the time up front. There's wisdom about this in Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Be impatient about taking action, but patient about seeing results. Be impatient about mediocrity, but patient about building greatness. Here's your actionable step for these final shifts. First, audit your information diet. Where are you getting financial information? This week, unfollow 5 low-quality sources and follow 2 high-quality experts with actual credentials and research-based content. For decision-making, practice this. On your next financial decision, gather information for 48 hours maximum, then act. Stop waiting for perfect information that doesn't exist. Bias toward action over endless analysis. For money velocity, check how much money is sitting in checking or savings accounts earning less than 1%. If it's more than 6 months of expenses, that money should be working for you in investments, or at a minimum, a high-yield savings account. For strategic impatience, ask yourself, what situation am I patiently tolerating that I should be impatiently changing? What investment am I impatiently abandoning that I should be patiently holding? Flip the script. Let me leave you with one final story. A man at age 30 stayed in a mediocre job for 8 years, patiently accepting mediocrity. Finally, he got impatient enough to quit and start a business. The first 2 years he lost money and almost gave up. He was being impatient about results. His friend told him, "You were patient for 8 years at a job going nowhere. Can't you be patient for 2 more years building something that could change your life?" He stayed patient with the process. Year 3 became profitable. In year 5, he sold the business for $2 million. He told me, "I finally learned the difference. Be impatient about staying stuck, but patient about getting unstuck. Information without action is just procrastination. Money without movement is stagnation." Strategic impatience isn't a contradiction. It's knowing when to sprint and when to run a marathon. The principle is this: the 1% are impatient about mediocrity but patient about greatness. They move fast on decisions but hold investments long. They consume quality information and turn it into immediate action. They keep their money in constant strategic motion. That's how you stop thinking poor and start thinking like the wealthy. Look, I've just given you 11 mental shifts that separate the wealthy from everyone else. Foundation shifts about assets, time horizon, and education. Behavioral shifts about creating versus consuming and understanding real risk. Strategic shifts about taxes, leverage, and abundance. Execution shifts about information quality, money velocity, and strategic impatience. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. Most of you watching this will nod along, maybe even take some notes, and then go right back to thinking exactly the same way you did before clicking this video. That's not me being pessimistic, that's just human nature. But for those of you who actually implement even half of these concepts, your financial future just changed dramatically. The choice is yours. Pick one shift to implement this week. Just one. Change how you think about assets. Start moving your idle money. Be strategically impatient about your situation. Whatever resonates most, do something with it. Comment mindset shift right now if this challenges how you think about money. Share it with someone stuck in a poor person's mindset. Because here's the final truth. Your bank account is a printout of your mindset. If you don't like the numbers, change your thinking. The 1% aren't special, they just think differently. You can too. But only if you actually do something today. Your bank account will reflect whatever you decide to do next.